Today, we need to look at one of the darkest chapters in all of human history. It's a story of almost unimaginable suffering, but it's also a story of incredible resilience. And it's a story that hasn't ended. Its echoes are all around us, shaping our world in ways we absolutely have to understand.
These words come from a man who lived through it. William J. Anderson wrote this in 1857, and he's basically warning us that no matter how awful the details we uncover, we're only seeing a tiny fraction of the real horror. His words really set the stage for us. We're trying to bear witness to a crime so huge it almost defies being told.
It's a huge question, right? The scale of it all is it's mind-boggling. But understanding has to start somewhere. It starts with seeing. It starts with listening to the voices that were silenced for so long. And it starts by going back, all the way to the beginning, before the chains.
To really get what was stolen, you have to first understand what was there. And this is so important to remember. The story of Black people does not begin with slavery. As one historian put it so powerfully, slavery wasn't Africa's history, it was a violent interruption of Africa's history.
Before being forced onto ships, these were people from countless different nations. They were farmers and artists, scholars and leaders. They had these incredibly complex societies, rich cultures, and they had names that their captors would never even bother to learn. They had whole lives that were just stolen in an instant.
This account it hits you with how sudden and brutal it all was. 1 minute, Adaba Kugawano is just a kid, playing in a field, and the next, his life, his freedom, his entire world, gone. This wasn't some slow process. It was a violent kidnapping, and it was repeated millions and millions of times.
And all that kidnapping led to the single largest forced migration in human history. The journey across the Atlantic, it has a name, the Middle Passage. One scholar described it as being consumed by the belly of the world. And honestly, that's exactly what it was. Just try to wrap your head around that number. 12.5 million people. Every single one of them was a life, a dream, a family shattered. This wasn't trade. It was a mass kidnapping on a continental scale, all to fuel the engine of a new global economy. And of those 12.5 million people, nearly 2 million never even made it to shore. They died in the suffocating darkness of those ships, from disease, from starvation, from unimaginable abuse, or sometimes by their own hand. The Atlantic Ocean literally became a graveyard. You see, the Middle Passage was so much more than just a journey. It was a process of deliberate dehumanization. People were, as the historian Saidiya Hartman writes, culturally unmade. Their names, their languages, their religions, their very identities were systematically stripped away. They were no longer Mbundu or Akan. They were property. They were cargo. And nothing shows this transformation into cargo more horrifically than the Zong massacre. The ship was running low on drinking water, and the sick Africans on board, well, they weren't going to sell for a high price. So the captain made a business decision. Since his insurance covered cargo lost at sea, he ordered over 130 living, breathing men, women, and children to be thrown overboard to drown. Their lives were literally worth more to him dead than alive.
For those who somehow survived the Middle Passage, they entered a new kind of hell. Life on a plantation wasn't about random acts of cruelty. No, it was a calculated, highly organized system of physical and psychological torture, and it was all designed for one single purpose: total and absolute control. This is how that architecture of torture was built.
This was the toolkit. Whipping was a constant threat, with salt often rubbed into the wounds just to make the pain worse. Branding with a hot iron literally marked a person as someone else's property. Mutilation, like cutting off a toe or an ear, was a terrifying public warning. And there were all kinds of sadistic devices, like spiked collars, that made even resting a form of torture. But under all that physical pain, there was a cruelty that ran even deeper.
The ultimate weapon of control was destroying the family. Think about it. The love between partners, between a parent and a child, that's the one thing that can't really be owned. So it was systematically destroyed. At just one auction in Georgia, an event the enslaved people called the weeping time, 436 men, women, and children from a single estate were sold off to different buyers across the country. Most would never see their loved ones again.
And here is the human cost of that system. In one man's own words, Jeffrey had just been sold. He begged his new owner to also buy Dorcas, the woman he loved. He promised they'd be good servants, that their children would be strong.
But his plea was just ignored. He was taken one way, she was taken another. An eyewitness said they just left him sitting on the ground, crying into his hands.
And this whole system wasn't just built on violence, it was engineered by the law. A legal idea called partus sequitur ventrum was key. It was a total break from English common law, and it basically meant a child's status, free or enslaved, followed the mother's. So if a mother was enslaved, her children were automatically born as slaves, no matter who their father was. This one legal trick turned women's bodies into instruments of profit and guaranteed that slavery would become a self-renewing, hereditary machine for generations.
Now, this system was officially dismantled over 150 years ago. But the architecture of control it created, it didn't just vanish. The physical chains were broken, but their echoes, you can still hear them and feel them in the systemic inequalities that exist today.
Let's just draw some straight lines here. The systemic separation of families at the auction block has a clear echo in the way mass incarceration disproportionately shatters Black families today. The total economic exploitation of enslaved labor, it laid the groundwork for a racial wealth gap that is still massive, nearly 2 centuries later. The medical neglect and horrific experiments performed on enslaved bodies find their echo in today's shocking racial disparities in health, especially in Black maternal mortality. And the very idea of Black people as property to be controlled, you can trace a direct line from that to the systemic racism and police brutality we see today. The past isn't even past.
But, and this is so important, this is not just a story of victimization. That would do a massive injustice to the people who endured it. Because against this unimaginable oppression, there was a constant, powerful, and absolutely unbreakable spirit of resistance and resilience. Let's talk about what that looked like.
Resistance took so many different forms. There were huge organized armed rebellions. The Haitian Revolution in 1791, it sent shockwaves of fear through every slave-holding society on earth. It proved that liberation could be won by force. Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831 was a spiritual and violent uprising from within the system. And of course, there was the incredible heroism of individuals like Harriet Tubman, who not only freed herself, but went back again and again into the heart of danger to lead hundreds more to freedom.
But resistance wasn't only about fighting back with weapons. Sometimes, the most profound act of resistance was simply remaining human in a system designed to destroy your humanity. It was preserving culture through song, creating the very foundations of gospel, blues, and jazz. It was blending African spiritual traditions with Christianity to create a new faith that could sustain them. It was in the intricate braiding of hair and giving their children unique names. These were powerful acts of self-determination. In a world that's trying to erase you, just existing with dignity is a revolutionary act.
This quote from Toni Morrison's masterpiece, Beloved, just perfectly captures the heart of that spiritual resistance. In a world designed to make you hate your own skin, the command to love it hard, well, that was a revolution. It was a powerful shield against the psychological war being waged against them. And this brings us back to what might be the most crucial point of all. We have to reframe this entire narrative. The story of people of African descent does not begin with subjugation. It is a story of rich civilizations, of incredible kingdoms, of art, of scholarship. That history was violently interrupted, but it was never, ever erased. The UN has rightly recognized slavery as one of the gravest crimes against humanity. But a resolution is just words on a page. Real justice, it requires memory, because remembering is how we shield the future. So the question for us today isn't just what happened. It's how are we going to choose to carry this memory forward, to build a world that is truly more just.